Spectacle was the default state of being for much of the ancient world as we know it. From the early city-states of Assyria to the final days of the crumbling Roman Empire, the spectacle of life, whether punishment from a divine otherworldly power or man-made fanfare to fill the arenas of kings, meant constantly being exposed to just how awesome and terrifying this world truly is. Rampant sickness and disease, famines, fires, infant mortality rates. When they weren't experiencing the tragedy of spectacle firsthand, they were inventing it. From chariot races and intense gladiatorial combat to blood sport and animal hunts, staggering encounters with the horrors of the terrestrial. This in stark contrast to the extraterrestrial spectacle of something like the 50s UFO craze, the pinnacle of the public's fascination with flying saucers and men from Mars, a kind of sensationalist obsession that walked in tandem with the rampant modern spectacle of capitalism and consumerism that only increased over the rest of the century. Now detached from the wrath of divine judgment, ancient perils both created and experienced, and UFOs increasingly reduced to a level of mundanity, that deeper desire or hunger to experience the truly profound still needed to be fed. Being the consumers that we are, we turn to our media and films for it, with producers and directors eager to tap into some discovered or perhaps invented human desire, the innate need to see something crazy. Well, when it comes to modern film spectacle, there's been no better director at satiating this hunger than Jordan Peele. So much of his spectacle leans on historical black anachronisms and shining a fine-tuned light on overlooked history. In this translation from folklore to film, they experience a kind of transformative reformation that bridges the gap between the real and the surreal. His psychological horrors are often tied up in specific visual iconography, plain-seeming objects that through his narratives force themselves into a lasting world of permanence and meaning. Take the teacup in Get Out, the apparatus through which Chris visits the sunken place, an amalgamation of black understandings concerning other black people caught up in the spheres of white influence, fame, and power. Or how about the scissors and rabbits in Us, alluding to themes of duplicity and tethering, combating the dueling secondary person that exists within all of us. In Nope, the object of Peele's desire is the camera itself, and its relationship to cultivating an entire history of spectacle. Here he interrogates the camera's role as both a spectacle capturing and creating device. Film is the first modern spectacle after all, and Peele explores that history through the imagined backstory of this guy, the jockey in Plate 626 of Edward Muybridge's Animal Locomotion, one of the first major studies in motion pictures, especially concerned with movement and form. Uncovering the story of this forgotten jockey reveals a dramatic kind of irony. The second the camera was capable of capturing and enshrining one person's legacy, it effectively erased another. Here we understand the exploitative relationship we have to modern spectacle as viewers, the way that entertainment for some constitutes the erasure of actual lived experience and history for others. We see this in the many black westerns that inspired Nope. It would have been spectacle enough to see this man on screen for the first time, Raymond St. Jacques, the first African-American actor to appear in a regular role on a Western series portraying Simon Blake on the 8th season of Rawhide, or to bear witness to Sidney Poitier's directorial debut, Buck and the Preacher, a film about Buck, a former soldier leading wagon trains of former slaves from the deep Louisiana South westward to the territories of Kansas. He negotiates safe passage with the indigenous people in the area and protects black former slaves from the wanton violence of white men hired by plantation owners. The spectacle of the West is well known in film Americana. So often it's the canvas for rugged individualism and machismo, patriarchal bravado and toughness. It's the spectacle of violence itself manifested. In white westerns, it's usually a general kind of violence, emphasizing the traditional divide of the law itself, with the rebels on one side and lawmakers on the other. In black westerns, it often manifests as white settler violence. This violence is the scourge of black cowboys living on the fringes, the outskirts, unable to set up permanent ties in these white-dominated lands. In this, the black cowboy fears more than anything a physical death, a literal one. The fragments of these narratives underline the pains of O.J. and M's upbringing, brought up on stories about their connections to Black forgotten legacy and all things Afro-pastoral. But as the spectacle that is Jean Jacket threatens to raise the farm, more than just a fear of literal death takes form, but the fear of a historical death, a multi-generational death, a complete and utter erasure of their historical connection to the land and familial history. And so the Haywoods are almost more concerned with documenting this great phenomenon than actually defeating it, relying on the film camera once again to enshrine their legacy. This gets to the core of Nope's fascination in exploring how traumatic legacy intertwines with the capitalist machine of spectacle, brought forth through the advent of filmmaking. Once even the most primitive cameras were invented, our relationship to spectacle was immediately transformed. The world of Nope and our own is one where the presence of cameras is constant, from security cameras to cell phone cameras to film cameras, worlds invaded by spectacle capturing and creating devices. The filmmakers of the modern world, in turn, find themselves serving audiences with even more insatiable appetites. And so, proto-directors like O.J., M., and Jupe rely on the spectacle of trauma as a vehicle to propel themselves into the stratum of stories worth telling. Worth being the key indicator here. We see this in Jupe, turning his trauma into a commodity with a level of grandeur that borders on parody. I've always found this scene in particular to be incredibly revealing, where he retells the tragic story of the monkey Gordy gone wild.
You haven't seen the Bad Gordy sketch on SNL? I mean, it pretty much nailed it better than I could.
There's nothing tragic in his retelling, though. Rather than even actually recall the gruesome events, he tells the story from the perspective of the SNL sketch version of the events, the comedic, commercialized one told for laughs.
Gordy Catan goes off. And it's Catan. He's just crushing it. He is a force of nature. He is killing on that stage.
This speaks to some kind of separation he's already developed. His trauma has become a story to be bought and sold, not something to actually heal from. OJ and M do the very same. In seeking to capture Jean Jacket on film, they hold on to the belief that the spectacle of generational trauma is capable of saving them under the oppressive system that destroyed their voices and legacy in the first place. This puts themselves at risk of an unfortunate calculation that people will care, that their names will be on the world's lips, if and only if they give them something otherworldly in return, even at the cost of their own lives. When shut out from the vehicle of storytelling, one in modern times so intimately entwined in capital, one must create spectacle, no matter how disgusting or vile, in order to be truly seen. Jean Jacket merges the grotesqueness of biblical spectacle with the same rabid fascination we find tuned in the modern era. Its divine stature illuminates its separation from our worldly concerns. In its animalistic nature, we see shades of wild, territorial beasts, not too dissimilar to our own. Yet within its gaping maw, in its hunger, we see something far more relatable than either. Eating and eating and eating everything in its way, discarding the rest without concern or care. We recognize both our own less savory relationship to consumption, but also the system of consumption itself. The one that chews up the narratives of the marginalized and the trauma-ridden and spits them out when it's done with them. I can't help but stop for a moment and ask, what does it mean to yearn for representation in this way? To ask to be seen by and through a machine we know at its core is rotten. A machine indifferent to the intricacies of our lives and history, outside the monetary gains we create for it. I don't have all the answers. As I mentioned before, through the modern machine of capital, our art experiences an even more tense and messier relationship with the forces that produce it. Not just any capital, but in the big budget, high-octane spectacle of the modern movie. Peele's already given us plenty, and I'd be lying if I said that they weren't awe-inspiring. But they're also terrifying, for more reasons than simply the content of their narratives would suggest. In his works, we're made acutely aware of the dark, inconsolable beast of industry, itself a spectacle to behold. Perhaps not as visceral or treacherous as the ones that plagued the ancient world, but in his cinema, he gets pretty damn close.
Nobody fucks with A-Wood, bitch! Nobody! Damn it!
Mind Theater is a solo effort produced and written by me, Eo Akingbade. For only $3 a month, you can support this show on Patreon. It really helps a lot. The link is in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
Of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.